everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Jane Eyre Project, that fabulous series for us Jane Eyre obsessed people. Today, we embark upon the 7th book for this series, but we are on episode 9. It's very odd. My brain gets confused. And that book is Ironskin by Tina Connolly. This sounds like it's going to be a cool fairies and fae steampunk kind of fantasy. Apparently in the story, Jane wears an iron mask, as demonstrated by the photo on the cover. And she is wearing it to cover the scars because of a fae curse. And then she finds the daughter of an artist who also has a fae curse, and she tries to kind of like work with her and teach her. So I'm assuming that's kind of like the Adele character. And obviously the father, the artist, is kind of the Rochester character. They do have somewhat different names, but it's obviously a Jane Eyre retelling. So I'm very intrigued. I'm also a little nervous just because, you know, anytime you embark upon fantasy, the quality of the book does depend a lot upon the world building. Now, as I've been doing the last couple of videos, I'm going to announce the next book I'm going to be reading for this Jane Eyre Project moment. And the next book, which I will be reading for the month of June, is My Plain Jane, which is part of the Janies series. It's the second book, but I've heard that you don't have to read all the books to read it. So let's hope that that's true. And I will try to get that video up on June 30th and keep up this last day of the month sort of system that I've got going on. But I do want to note that my cousin's wedding is like that week. So if something happens, I'll let you know somehow, some way, somewhere. This video is pretty spoiler free indeed. The only things that I really talk about are things that are in like the first chapter or the summary, and the rest is just characters, like my thoughts on characters and overall themes. So I try to keep this pretty spoiler free just so that maybe it won't be an eternally long video. And let's just jump in to the video and have fun. All right, I'm finally getting an update in after like a week of reading Ironskin. By the way, I have switched from these huge post-it notes for my note-taking experience for these videos to these ginormous squares right here. And I gotta say, so many notes can fit on this. It's the best decision that I have ever made. So I'm gonna talk about this book first, and then I gotta show you my little book haul that I've gotten over the week. So reading of Ironskin has actually been kind of a slow process, and it's nothing to do with the actual book. It actually has to do with me. I've just been dog tired. I don't know if it's because I did a lot of like social interaction last week, or if it's because I started the project of completely rearranging my living room, and that means because all my books are in my living room that I ended up starting a rearrangation / bookshelf addingness to my whole book collection. I don't know if those are the reasons why I'm dog tired, but a girl was dog tired. And while this is light fantasy, it is still fantasy. There's still a lot of world building going on. And so I've been taking it in quite slowly just to make sure that I don't miss anything. It's not steampunk in this traditional way. Because most traditional steampunk is taking place in Victorian era, sometimes before and maybe a little after Victorian era situations where the machinery is steam run, and thus the concept of steampunk. The world building kind of jumps right in and then reveals itself through the narrative more than like being explained by exposition. So from what I've gotten in the first like 108 pages is that the Fae basically traded with the humans for technology that they had, and then there was a war. And because of that war, there was no access to that Fae technology. So people are running all their technology, either through like they're having to go back to really old things, or they're having to run things through like coal or steam, or all the things that are sort of the basics. So why I say that it's not the traditional steampunk moment is that it feels very much like it's set in more of a era that's like post World War I, or like even elements of post World War II. I'm going to go with more of like this alternate England that's kind of a mix of different eras. It has this early 1900s to 1920s kind of vibe to me personally. I will say that I always appreciate a fantasy that does not meander and not use a heck ton of exposition that's kind of boring to explain its world building and its characters. And this one, chef's kiss on jumping into the action and the point. Thank you for not meandering. That being said, plot-wise, it just kind of jumps right in. We follow Jane Elliot as she gets this new governess job. She's had many governess jobs leading up to this because she does have to wear this half mask. And I find this, the discussion around mirrors and masks in this book very intriguing, but I will start with the first element of her half mask, her personal issue there. So during the Fey War, their weapons would injure people, and it would cause this Fey curse, which would mean that the injury wouldn't heal, but also what would sort of leak out of these injuries were emotions, and the emotions would affect other people. Now, it's a different emotion for all of what they call the Ironskins, because they have to wear the iron, because if you know anything about fairy or Fey lore, they don't react well to iron. So they have to wear iron to cover these to keep this curse from coming out. And everybody has a different emotion tied to their curse. So in Jane's case, it interestingly is rage and anger. And it really draws from this concept that is in Jane Eyre, but I don't think Jane Eyre experiences this anger like up front as an adult the way she did as a child. I actually kind of talked about this when I reread Jane Eyre, but when I reread it, you know, it's the fact that she meets Helen at Lowood, and Helen does not really hold on to grudges and explains why she thinks life is too short to hold on to anger. And that really influences Jane's way of coping with anger as she becomes an adult and she's able to kind of work through the rage. So this is a world where Helen does exist in the story. She is the younger sister of Jane Elliot, but because the dynamic between Jane and Helen is different, and because Jane Elliot's backstory is different, in which, you know, she's had a lot of negative experiences, the fact that the book kind of plays on the fact that she never really got to learn how to really work through rage, and even though the mask helps her work through like the curse of having this fiery anger to a certain extent, it's still like this hidden part of her, which is an aspect that does exist in Jane Eyre, but isn't really focused on it. As a whole, I feel like this book really does focus on some of the smaller details that aren't normally fixated on in a lot of the different narratives that I've read so far, or I haven't really discussed as much as some of the other ones. The other one is obviously something that is a huge part of Jane Eyre's personality and thought, and it is this concept of artifice, of course. In Jane Eyre really despises artifice. This definitely discusses artifice through the idea of literal masks and mirrors. So the Rochester character, Rockhart, he is an artist, and he makes these really interesting masks that are supposed to sort of show the kind of negative elements of the inside of humanity. So that's one element. There's also, I feel like this author really merges a lot of ideas and characters from Jane Eyre together. So Helen is kind of a mix of characters. She is definitely someone that I kind of put in what I like to call the Daisy Buchanan category from The Great Gatsby. She's a beautiful little fool, shall we say. So there's almost this concept that to Jane's own family is tied this idea of artifice. I think Helen is the type of character that's like, I'm going to marry for success and money. Her war-torn experiences have led to her not wanting to kind of push through and suffer anymore. Whereas Jane kind of, because, you know, it is literally part of her because of her scars, she has to confront things, does not have the ability to live in a state of artifice. So she obviously has given up on it and has decided that it is not something that suits her. I do think it's interesting that the character of Helen is chosen to be that type of thing. I don't dislike the idea of this character being a different sort of character. Also with the concept of fae comes with the ideas of beauty itself, what beauty means, what beauty even means to the fae, and legends of changelings and whatnot is something that is intriguing. And I do like too that this book is definitely a mood. Like, I feel like it's more of a mood than most of the retellings that I have read. It really does embrace this sort of claustrophobic, still a lot of foreboding mystery vibe. These concepts of color I think are really cool. Jane is introduced with the color gray and sort of this motif of gray, which is a color that Jane Eyre wears a lot. And I like that not only did Jane Elliott have a lot of things about her that were just like this gray element because of the mask, because of her general feelings, because there's sort of a smokiness post-war vibe. I am enjoying it, and I do want to know, what is the mysteriousness about? Quick little book haul because I just want to share. I acquired lots of cheap books and one like full price book, but it was on sale over the week. Now, obviously, thrift books came in for me again. Got this one from Thrift Books, by the way, with a edition of My Plain Jane, the next book I'm going to read for this series. So yay! And it is in super good condition. Went to the library book sale because one of my friends was performing in the county choir, and the performance space was right next to my local library. So I popped in on a Sunday last week. Obviously, when you go to the library book sale on Sunday, there's not always a lot of options. Like, all the good options are gone. But usually when I go to a library book sale, I'm looking for obviously new and interesting things that I want to try. But I'm honestly looking for like hardcover editions of things that I have already read or only own in paperback. I did pick out 2 things, and I bet they were like only $1 or so. So the first thing is a hardcover edition of one of my favorite books, or a book that I remember being a favorite. I really want to reread it, and that is The Lovely Bones by Alice Sebold. So yay, I can replace my paperback copy with this fabulous hardcover, which is, yet again, barely used. I'm rocking. And then I also picked out Death by Shakespeare by Catherine Harkup. And this seems like it's a nonfiction about whether the deaths in Shakespearean plays are realistic. Like, how realistic are they? Or could these elements of science explain the deaths of certain characters? For the next one, I gotta show you what happened. As I was moving books around on my bookshelves, I went to move my pocket edition of The Hobbit, and it wasn't in sunlight or hot or anything. I went to pull it out to kind of move it to see if I liked a new place for it, and it got stuck to my copy of The Christmas Carol. And this happened. I don't know what happened, but I decided that I didn't want to keep it like this. Also, I cannot do tiny print anymore, and this is too small for me. So I thought I cannot exist in a library that does not have The Hobbit in it. And so I found, for half off, the illustrated edition of The Hobbit on Amazon. Look at the dwarves. Isn't that nice? Now I have a really super nice edition of The Hobbit with like print that my eyeballs can actually focus on. So that was my little book haul. That was my update. Oh, I tripped over my dog, or we tripped over each other, and I really hurt my knee. And I have a pimple on my forehead. I'm gonna ice while I talk. I am on page 210, so I only have about 1/3 left of the book. Since the last time I left you, there has been an addition of dwarf mythology mixed in with the fairies and fae situation. I think it's going to really facilitate, well, it already has facilitated some elements of the plot. I'm always excited to see a traditional fantasy race. Even though I am enjoying the story overall, there was this point that I think maybe I'm past now, where it hits like this wall where you don't feel like Jane is accomplishing anything, and certain relationships are not seeming to move forward, and it's almost like necessary to have that happen, but at the same time it's sort of frustrating. The reason it's necessary is because she is trying to figure out what she needs to do with Dory and like what she needs to do with her teaching strategy, and there is sort of this weird relationship with Roshart. By the way, I have switched to listening to the audiobook so that I can listen to the audiobook and read along to help me like focus a little better, because my focus has been kind of all over when it comes to reading anything but my e-reader. So I realized I was pronouncing his name completely incorrectly, and I probably will still do that. So we're going to call him Edward from now on. But her and Edward have sort of this not really defined relationship, right? So both of those things that are like the key moment of the plot, which is those two relationships, reached this stagnant point. But I think maybe it might be over that hump, because there were also some things that made that necessary for Jane to come to some realizations about herself. So I'm hoping that from now on it's going to kind of progress a little bit. Now, speaking of the Edward relationship, I do wish that they had more scenes together. Actually, I feel like they probably have like the same amount of scenes together in the first part of their getting to know each other and her working for him as probably Jane and Rochester do. But for some reason, I'm not getting like the attraction or the affection vibe from it, because there is so much mystery surrounding the interactions. I think the nature of their discussions haven't been done in a way where you can feel that they would be in love yet, or that even that she would feel a one-sided sort of love. So it kind of feels like it's coming out of nowhere. If you've read this book, tell me if it's just me that feels this way. How do I say this without telling too much? I guess I can say that like I am really happy that Edward's masks do actually play into the plot. They're not just a symbolism thing, which I'm excited to see more about. I do have a lot more to say on an even deeper topic, but I kind of want to see how the rest of the book plays out before I discuss it. And also I want to discuss it when I'm not in excruciating pain. So I'm going to save some additional discussions for after I finish the book. I finished the book, and then I took a couple of days to kind of consider my thoughts, both my thoughts on like the extra stuff that I told you I wanted to talk about, and the stuff that I just wanted to say for just overall final things about my rating and all that. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the main theme and the thing I really wanted to consider. The reason I wanted to consider this is because this book very much centers around the concept not only of appearance, but also things that you might consider flaws both emotionally and mentally, as well as just things that maybe you can't see that you consider flaws, if that makes any sense. And the reason I wanted to finish the book before I discuss this is because I wanted to see how the author would handle it. While I wouldn't say that the topic is per se totally a sensitive topic, I think if you're a certain kind of person, that topic could be sensitive. And there is sort of this difficult moment about the book where it is discussing how the things that we as people consider flaws about ourselves can either be a curse or a gift. And it very much asks the question, is it worth tearing yourself apart for the concept of normality, be that a physical feature or something internally? Or is it better to sort of work towards finding a way to let the things that you consider flaws about yourself be something that doesn't stop you, but becomes somewhat of a gift because you can learn to work with it in a way that only you can. And it does offer enough points of view in the book too, of people that are willing to just be who they are no matter what their circumstances, and people that are willing to go to the extreme to acquire what they think is beautiful and normality. And so there's a good balance of like things to talk about. So I don't think that there's anything that would offend anyone in this, but I'm just not easily offended. So do what you will with this discussion topic. On to my super final thoughts. So there are a lot of things that this book does right, and a few things that I think this book missed a mark on. I think the world building is, for the most part, pretty excellent. It does a pretty good job for the type of fantasy it is, which of course is a light fantasy. Character development, I think, is really excellent and solid. I think it's one of the best elements of the book. And I did enjoy the overall writing style of the book. There were a couple times when I think that the author could have like tweaked the word order in some of her sentences, just because some sentences I had to read a couple of times to understand what it was saying, but that could have just been me. Of course, there are a lot of really clever, or what I thought was clever, nods to Jane Eyre, but also I liked too how this book handled the concept of not having a wife in the attic, but still having something that was similar in feeling to it. I'm always intrigued to see how the retellings handle that element. I thought this book did a good job with the way they chose to handle that, and I thought it really fit well with the concept of the novel overall. So the main issue I have is the one that I already discussed, is the romance element. Sort of got better for me, but not good enough for me to really believe the romance between Edward and Jane, and that's a big part of the story. I did realize kind of what it was, is that in Jane Eyre, Edward and Jane, when they do speak, most of their discussions are getting to know each other, even though he has a secret. Most of them are about themselves and getting to know like things that they like and dislike, and some of Edward's history, even though he can't tell her or doesn't want to tell her all of it. So it is getting to know each other. Whereas in Ironskin, most of Edward and Jane's interactions, they're very surface level. I do think their dialogue is really well written and their discussions are intriguing, but they don't really get to know each other, and it makes the romance very much take you out of the story. Another thing about the Jane and Edward thing in respect to those two characters is that I'm not sure either of them really learned what the author intended for them to learn at the end of the book. I feel like they kind of did, but then there wasn't enough time spent on it for me to like yet again like believe it. So I don't know how I feel about that still. My other issue is a really minor one, almost nitpicky one, but I want to mention it because it is something that I wish the author or the editor of the book had tweaked it just a little bit, just to make the pacing of the book even better, because I do feel like some elements of this story do get a little repetitive, and I did find myself once or twice going, I already know this, or this has already been implied enough, and this is only like a 300-page book, so I'd rather you put that page count or the word count into something else, like the romance, and developing that instead of developing more of like the world building or like backstory or something like that. Overall though, I do think this is an enjoyable read. It's a nice bit of escapism to jump into. I do think that it has an entertaining plot. I definitely like this. I didn't love it, so I gave it a 4-star rating. I think that's a pretty fair rating for this book because there is a lot of good stuff, but there's a couple of things that need some adjustment, in my personal opinion, in the story. Now, Ironskin is the first book in a series of 3 books, and I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to pick up the rest of the series, even though I did give this one 4 stars. The only reason I'm not sure is because the second book, it seems like Helen is the main character of that book. As of what I've seen, though, in this book, she's not really my type of person, so I don't know if I'd want to read a whole book about Helen, although there's nothing to say that, you know, the experiences that she had in this book, she can't learn from them and then, like, grow as a character in the next book. But there's some other characters around that character that I'm not, like, super invested in spending a lot of time with, so I don't know about that. And then the third book is about Dory. There's like a time jump, and it's actually about Edward's daughter, Dory, which I am kind of interested in that. I don't know. I guess what I might do with the rest of the series is maybe if I have an opening in my audiobook moment and I'm not currently reading an audiobook, I might pick up the audiobooks of those 2 books, because the audiobook for Ironskin was really quite excellent. I think it has a really good narrator, and if it has the same narrator for the other 2 books, I think I might just listen to them in audiobook, because that might float my boat a little bit more. So that is it for the Ironskin video. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this, and I will see you all soon with another video. Thank you for watching. Bye.